Hey everybody, Chris here again. Welcome back to the channel. Always good to have you with us. So today we're going to look at Windows 3.0. As you can see, I have it loaded up here, running Word 1.1 for Windows, and we'll look at some of the other features of Windows 3.0 as well. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Huh? This isn't Windows 3.0. OS 2 1.3? What's going on here? Okay, so all kidding aside, we're not looking at Windows 3.0 today. We're looking at OS 2 version 1.3, which looks very much like Windows 3.0. So what's really interesting about OS 2 is, and many people don't know this, it actually started out as a joint project between Microsoft and IBM. And version 1.3 was the split point where it became an exclusive IBM product thereafter. At that point, Windows started to take off, and Microsoft thought, why should I develop this? I should develop my own thing. But if you look at the look and feel of this, it looks very similar to Windows 3.0. So let's have a look here a little bit. I've actually configured a couple of things, including LAN manager networking to get us access to file shares, as well as TCP IP configuration to get us access to things like Telnet and FTP. We'll give you a tour of that, and then I'll show you how I set it up. It was not easy. So let's get right to it. So when you start up OS 2 1.3, or pretty much, I think, most of the 1.x series, though the very first version was not graphical based, you can see that you're greeted here with the desktop manager, which is essentially the presentation manager, not to be confused with the program manager. That's right. You can see that here, and we also have over here this main group for the desktop manager. And we can also pop open the utilities group as well. So the windows open up a little differently than they do in Windows 3.0 or 3.1. But here you can see that if you want to do things like shut down your computer, you can come to desktop and then shut down. You can cascade things if you want. You can also do other sorts of arrangements, but you do have this ability to do different selections, which is somewhat similar to Windows 3.0 and 3.1. And as you saw with Microsoft Word, it looks practically identical to the Microsoft Word 1.1b that you may have used under Windows 3.0 or 3.1. So there's definitely that. What's really interesting, though, about a plain vanilla installation of OS 2 1.3 is you don't get a whole lot by way of programs. You have the ability to launch an OS 2 window or full screen. You also have a print manager and a system editor, which is basically a text editor for system files or pretty much any other files, a command reference, and then any sort of other applications that you install. And then for the accessories or utilities, you'd think, yeah, I'm going to get a whole bunch here. But pretty much you get just things like copying disks, comparing them, labeling them. Really? So labeling disks got its own category here? It kind of feels like they were stretching, as well as formatting, doing a check disk, fixed disk utility, as well as printing and displaying pictures or converting them, which I found kind of interesting, and then this lockup keyboard and mouse. So let's actually start with that, because this is one of the more interesting graphical features. If we double click on this, we can come over here and lock with a picture, and we can choose the standard logo that's there. And then from there you can choose a password. I could just say 1234, 1234, okay, and then you can click lock now, and lo and behold, now we're locked. So not really great graphical, but it does have that original OS 2 logo there. Now if we click unlock, hopefully it'll let us out. Oh, okay, this is interesting. So to unlock, you actually just type the password, and then I think it'll unlock, and then press enter. So not really intuitive. You kind of have to know what you're doing, or you may be locked forever. But I think from a graphical perspective, that's one of the more interesting things that you'll see here. All right, so not too much interesting under the utilities group. There is a control panel. It's not like you would expect. You can choose different screen colors and things that are in here if we wanted to change that. We also can change your date and time. Kind of interesting that this is the default option for the control panel. You can have a warning beep. You can change your mouse settings, I guess, if you want to make it right or left-handed. Or change the clicking options as well. I guess you can change if you want to have some sort of a logo displayed. So you've got different options there. But really, there's not a whole lot of options that are here. And then you've got your installation where you can add and delete fonts, printer drivers, and Q drivers, things along those lines. So there's that. That's pretty much the control panel. And then again, if we look at some of these other things, they're not quite as interesting. We can run check disk. Looks like your standard check disk that gets run, so there's that. And you can also run the fixed disk utility, which I guess is like fdisk, and you can see different information about the different partitions you have. I just have this one 61 megabyte partition. So that's kind of interesting. I guess I told it the wrong thing here. Do we want to exit? Yes. Okay. So there's that. If we head back over to main, one thing that I didn't show, I don't think, is that there is a file manager. And if we look at the file manager, it looks very similar to, say, the Windows 3.1 or 3.0 file manager. And you've got your various drives and things. So kind of neat. Your basic file manager, but it does the trick. But it looks a lot like what we would see in Windows. Let's go to Help About here. Operating System 2 File Manager. Copyright Microsoft. There you have it. And then from there, you've got, down here at the bottom left, a DOS window. And it does launch full screen. There's no other way to launch it. I tried to bring over some popular DOS programs to see if I could run them, like Harvard Graphics. But all I get is a program too big to fit into memory. So maybe you have more knowledge than I do on this. If you have it, leave it in the comments. I could not really figure out how to get programs like Harvard Graphics or WordPerfect 5.1 to run. Also of interest to get out of here, it's going to be Control Escape. And that'll take us back here. So probably more common in OS2 is the OS2 window. And from there you can do other types of commands like E for the editor that we saw earlier, or run pretty much any other OS2 program that we have on disk here. And as we do our demonstration on how I set up the networking, I'll definitely show you more of that as well. So a little bit about how the startup configuration is performed. In OS2, there isn't per se an autoexec.bat, but there is a config sys, and there's also a startup.cmd file, at least in this version of OS2. So we can have a look at config.sys. And what's really interesting about it is you're going to pretty much have any setting you could ever imagine. For example, somewhere in here we've got the fact that we've got a VGA display set, and that's set in here, as well as your video devices and your pointers, all set in this one file. So kind of like DOS from that perspective. So you've got this graphical environment, but it's configured via this configuration file. All of our networking is also in here, which we'll talk about as we do the walkthrough. But you can see the different networking options as well. And also, let's see, what else do we have here? Setting other types of things that you would expect in a config sys, like file control blocks, the break key. So there are similarities, but there's also differences in that we're specifying the number of threads. The things you wouldn't typically see in DOS, you do have here. Your path statements as well as a dpath. In a particular interest, you can also set a help variable, which I think assists you with finding the different help files. So similar yet different, and I'm not an expert on it, but I did find it intriguing. Something else that gets executed on startup is the startup.command file. And in my case, we just start up workstation. So that's pretty much the only thing that it's doing, but also an interesting concept. So similar to MS-DOS, there is a LAN manager available for OS2, and I do have it installed. So I can do commands like netuse, and you'll see that I currently have drive Z mapped to my Raspberry Pi. I can go to drive Z and do a dir, and you can see all the different files that I have there. There is also a TCP IP stack for this version of OS2, and there are people who have got it to work properly, natively, together with LAN Manager. I have not been able to do it, but what I did do is create a batch file, or a command file rather, that can stop LAN Manager and then launch us into actually using the TCP IP stack, which in this case is IBM TCP IP version 1.31, which is essentially a bundling of FTP software's applications, which include things like Telnet, Traceroute, FTP, and your other standard suite of command line utilities. So similar to Linux, we can do an ifconfig, And in this case, our interfaces are along the lines of ND0, ND1 for NDIS. But here we can see that we have an interface that is up and running broadcast, so that's great. And with that set up, we can then telnet. And from here, you've seen me in past videos log into my Raspberry Pi, and we have done that here. And we can also FTP places. And here we are FTP'd into the Raspberry Pi. So that's kind of a rudimentary tour of OS2 1.3 from Microsoft. At this point, I'm going to show you how I set up the TCP IP stack, as well as setting up the Microsoft LAN manager. For demonstration purposes today, I'll be using VirtualBox to install Microsoft OS2 1.3. However, you can also use real hardware. Let's get started. First of all, the instructions you see on the right-hand side of the screen are available in my GitHub repository that you see here. Feel free to go and download them and follow along, or you can just watch me as I go through the steps today. Let's have a look at some of the items we're going to need to perform this installation today. First of all, you're going to need Oracle VM VirtualBox. I suggest going with version 6.0.18 or lower. That can be found on the virtualbox.org webpage by going to the Downloads link, and then going down to the VirtualBox Older Builds link, then the 6.0 link, and then you can scroll down and find it. Alternatively, you can just click on the link that I provided in my directions. That's the easy button. Something else we're going to need is WinImage. We'll be using that for purposes of making a floppy disk of network card drivers. Also, we're going to need Microsoft OS2 1.30.1, which I think equivalates to 1.3. In any event, you'll need your installation disks for that. Also going to need your installation disks for Microsoft OS2 LAN Manager 2.2c Workstation, as well as installation disks for IBM TCP IP for OS2 1.3.1. And finally, you're going to need AMD PCNet drivers for VirtualBox, which you can find by going to this WinWorld form PC link and downloading the ether te1.zip file that you see listed there. Now that we've located items, the next thing we need to do is start installing them. The first couple of items to install are going to be Oracle VM VirtualBox and WinImage. I won't be demonstrating those installations today since I already have these products installed. From there, once installed, we can go ahead and create and configure a virtual machine. So to do that, we will launch VirtualBox. And we can now click on the New button, and we'll type OS2. And it pre-selects the fact that it is OS2. For memory, we're going to want to go with 32 megabytes because we are installing a very old version of OS2. For hard disk, let's create a virtual hard disk now. Do a VMDK file, dynamically allocated. For the size, this is important. Don't create a disk too big. 250 megabytes is fine. I think if you go over 512, you're going to have some problems. We'll click Create. Great. From here, we can go and set up our network adapter settings. So I'm going to right-click on this and go to Settings. Go to Network. Set the adapter to be enabled. Choose Bridged Adapter, and I'm going to bridge to my wireless. You can bridge to wireless or wired. It really doesn't matter. Either is fine. Click OK. And there we have it. Let's move down in our directions a little bit. Make sure we're tracking. Indeed, we are. Oh, yes. We also should remove the CD-ROM controller because it will actually slow down the installation of OS2. So go to Settings, Storage, find that empty controller, come down here and hit the minus button, and remove. Gone. Click OK. Perfect. With our virtual machine created, it's time to install OS2. So let's go ahead and click that green Start button up here. And from there, we can actually go to the devices and floppy drives, and you can do this in either order. Choose a disk image, navigate to your files,
And we want disk install A. So basically, install A is going to be the first disk that we put into the drive. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick restart here. And we'll be on our way. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it. We can go ahead and press enter to continue. We'll be given some important details. Press enter again. Enter one more time. And enter again. And at this point, we can accept the predefined primary partitions, which is perfectly fine for our purposes. And from here, we get to do a reset. Now, to do resets in VirtualBox, you can use the host key in R, which my host key is the right control key. So with that, I'm going to do that, and it'll reboot. At this point, we're told to put in disk 1. I've put disk 1 in the drive. And we have a choice between a high-performance file system or the FAT file system. I'm just going to go with FAT. From here, we can accept the predefined system configuration. Yes for VGA adapter. And you're going to want to change the mouse to be Microsoft Mouse PS2 version. From there, we can accept the configuration. And we get to put disk 2 into the drive. Next up, disk 3. And then disk 4. Disk 5. Then we need to put in disk B. Then we need to put disk A back into the drive. And then it's the system support disk. And now the driver's presentation manager disk. And we're not going to be installing a printer. And we do not have a device support disk to install, so we'll say no as well. Perfect, congratulations, you have installed OS2. So let's go ahead and eject the disk from the drive. And from there, we can do a restart. With OS2 installed, it's time to install LAN Manager. So let's go ahead and, from the main group, select an OS2 window. And we can go and put into the virtual floppy drive the setup disk, which is going to be called setup.image in my case. We can change to drive A and type setup. We'll choose OK for the first screen, the second screen, the third screen. Now we need to put workstation 1 disk into the drive. Press enter. And now workstation 2. Put that in the drive and press enter. Okay, at this point, we're actually going to need to make a driver disk. So I'm going to set this aside for a minute. And we're going to go to our list of files. And in our list of files is that Ether E1 AMD PCNet driver that we downloaded. I'm going to extract that to a subfolder. And from there, I'm going to launch WinImage. Click on OK. Do File, New, choose a 1.44 megabyte disk. OK. Image, inject a folder. Navigate to that directory I just extracted at the very top level. Click OK. Yes, all the files are injected. Now we can go File, Save As, change the type to be IMA, and we'll just create a file called PCNet, and we'll put this on the desktop so that we can find it easily. Done. Now you can close WinImage in this other window. Now back over here to the devices, go floppy drives, choose an image, and choose this PCNet disk that you just made on the desktop. Perfect. Now we can go back here, choose other driver, A drive is fine, and our PCNet driver is found. Okay. We're going to choose both TCP/IP and NetBEUI. Click OK. And we're going to press enter again. Put an IP address in. This needs to be a static, unique IP address on your network. Put in a subnet mask, typically 255.255.255.0 is fine. Put in the IP address of your router. Okay. Computer name can be whatever you want. Domain, I usually go with workgroup. Then we can click OK, and then save. Now we need workstation 2 disk again. We'll navigate back to that. Put that in the drive. And we need OS2 drivers disk as well. So we can navigate to that. Put that in the drive. Enter. All right, installation's complete. We can press the enter key, and we're back. Excellent. Let's scroll down on our directions here so we can catch up a little bit. You can see that's pretty much what we went through at this point. But next up, we're going to want to go ahead and take the virtual disk out of the drive and reboot to activate the LAN manager. So to reboot, the proper way to do it is to go over to the desktop manager, then desktop, shut down, and then shut down. And from there you can choose yes, and we can do host key R, and we'll reboot. And on boot, we should have a startup.command window that launches. We can press enter for our username and password. And once complete, we can test and make sure that everything is working properly by trying to map a drive, which completed successfully. We can change to that drive and do a directory, and lo and behold, we have finished installing LAN Manager. Our final installation today is going to be IBM TCP/IP 1.3.1. Now, this does not play nicely with LAN Manager, so I'll show you what you can do there to make them play as nicely as possible together. So for this, we're going to launch an OS2 window and make a directory called TCP/INST and change to that directory. The reason we do this is because for whatever reason, you can't run the installer right off the disk. You have to copy portions of it to the hard disk. Let's go ahead and go up to floppy drives and put the first disk into the drive. And let's change to it. And we'll just say copy star.star to C:. Since we didn't put a slash in there, that will put it into the current working directory. Now we can go back to drive C and type TCP/INST. Click OK. Click OK for the locations, and OK to install the files. Go ahead and put disk 2 into the drive when prompted. Click OK. Put disk 3 into the drive when prompted. Click OK. And finally, disk 4. Once disk 4 finishes, we can go ahead and configure. For the host, you can choose whatever you'd like. For the domain, I usually go with workgroup. For the network, we're going to configure ND0. You can make the IP address the same as you used for LAN Manager. I think that's what I used. Go ahead and put an address in for the router. And you can also put an address in for the name server if you'd like. And then click OK. For the miscellaneous applications, just click OK. Same for server programs. Same for NetBIOS, InterDrive, vMail, SendMail, and click No for the vMail locally option. It doesn't matter. Kernel, OK. Kerberos, OK. Bind, OK. PC, TCP, DOS, Windows applications, OK. Then we can click Save. Now, if you want to configure one of those servers, be my guest. I just am not doing that. So you can certainly go and do that. Okay, this statement here is actually very important because we have two different versions of Protocol INI on disk. We have one version associated with LAN Manager and one associated with TCP IP. We need to merge the two together. We'll go ahead and click OK here. And then click OK again.
First, let's go ahead and edit the startup.command file. And what we're going to do is take this netbind line and delete it. And I'm going to take this TCP MGR line and cut it, and we're going to actually put it into another file. From there, we can save this file. And we need to choose a type to associate with it, so we'll choose type and then set. Great. Now we can go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to paste that command in here. And I'm going to put a command above it, net stop workstation/y. And this is going to be the basis of a file that we are going to run whenever we want to start TCP IP. I'm going to save this file as TCP, or start tcp.cmd. Perfect. From there we can exit, and we're all set with that. Next, we need to merge configurations between TCP IP and LAN Manager. So I'm going to change to the LAN Manager directory and edit protocol.ini, and we're going to add a new section called socket. And I'm going to steal this line here because I'm lazy. We're going to change the driver name to be $socket. And if I come down here, I can actually steal this bindings line. And we'll paste that here. Great. From there, we can go ahead and save this file and exit. If prompted for the file type to set, choose plain text file and then hit save. Great. Let's see where we are in the instructions at this point. Perfect. So we've made it down to this point. You can see that we followed everything here. Let's go ahead and restart. We'll see the workstation service start. Press enter for your username and password. And from there we can do our net use check and go to drive Z, and we can see that LAN Manager is working. Let's now run our start TCP command. You see it's going to stop LAN Manager, workstation service, and start the TCP IP service. So now we can do things like telnet. And lo and behold, it works. We can also do FTP. And that also works. Now at this point, if you want to run LAN Manager again, I hate to say it, but you're going to have to reboot. I've tried to find a way to restart LAN Manager, and it will fail. It will not work properly. All right, well, that's what I had for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I certainly learned a lot in making the video. Hopefully you learned a lot in watching it. I'm a lot more familiar with MS-DOS than I am with OS2, so there you have it. This is going to be part 1 in a 4-part series, so there's definitely more to come. Definitely subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down. That helps us decide what sort of content we make in the future. But that's pretty much it for now, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.